A small but vocal group of Republicans could make or break House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy's bid to become the next House Speaker. McCarthy won the House GOP's nomination in a 188-31 vote, but right now lacks the 218 votes needed when a full House vote is held in January. Congressman Matt Gaetz, Republican from Florida, joining me right now. First, good morning. You've openly opposed McCarthy right here on our air. Tell us why.
Well, Kevin McCarthy believes in a House of Representatives where the leadership make all the decisions. And whether it's Republicans or Democrats in charge, we've seen that fail the American people. We've seen it result in bills that are thousands of pages of long, spending billions of dollars without even the time to be able to review legislation. Our vision is for a House of Representatives where all of the members are empowered to represent their constituents, to have a real voice on matters of appropriations. And I think that's important given the fights that we have ahead with the Biden administration over spending. The principal mandate for Republicans is to curb inflation. We believe that government spending is a principal driver of the inflation crushing Americans today, and we don't see Kevin McCarthy fit for that battle. I'm also troubled that in the days following January 6th, it was Kevin McCarthy's belief that President Trump ought to resign, and he was even caught on an audio recording saying that my verbal criticism against Liz Cheney might have been gaslighting violence against people. And of course, we know that just criticizing someone politically isn't violence. That's the type of discourse and debate that ensures that our country doesn't devolve into violence. So we think that Kevin McCarthy is more of a flight Republican than a fight Republican, and we think that he believes in a system that is top down, not bottom up. Republicans are expected to have about a 4-seat majority, and there have already been 5 of us, most recently Ralph Norman of South Carolina, who've come forward to say we don't intend to vote for him on the floor.
You know, at one point, you actually floated the idea of former President Trump for House Speaker. So I want to know who you'd support today, and are you interested in the position?
No, I'm not running for Speaker, and I don't think President Trump is either, given his most recent announcement. Someone like Ohio's Jim Jordan, I think, would be a good consensus candidate. He is the Congress's most talented member. He's our most hardworking member. And I don't think that there are 5 people that would oppose Jim Jordan for Speaker. Now, of course, he's not seeking the position now, but neither was Paul Ryan just before he was elected Republican Speaker. It was actually Kevin McCarthy's failed bid that gave rise to Paul Ryan's speakership. I wasn't a big fan of Paul Ryan, but I do believe that when Kevin McCarthy ultimately comes to the conclusion that he doesn't have the votes, which simple math would dictate at this point, we would be able to go to another option who would be able to unite all wings of the Republican Party. We're a big tent. We've got centrists, moderates, America First folks, MAGA folks. And for us to be a capable fighting force for the American people, we need a leader with credibility across every spectrum of the Republican conference. And that person is not Kevin McCarthy.
You know, what should be the #1 priority for the House in 2023 now that the GOP has reestablished power?
You just ran a great segment on the impact of inflation when it comes to people traveling, when it comes to filling up the gas tank. And the Biden policies on energy have harmed our economy, and they're being felt at the kitchen table. And so I believe that one of the first pieces of legislation we ought to pursue should unlock American energy, should get rid of some of the Biden policies that have retarded investment in particularly the shale development. We need more infrastructure around liquefied natural gas. And if we do those things, I think the American people would see a tangible impact. That's also the type of policy reform that I think could get through even a Chuck Schumer-controlled Senate. You know, there are Democrat senators who are getting calls from their constituents about these high travel prices, high gas prices, high grocery prices, and we ought to consider that first and foremost.
Let's talk about the presidency. There's a new Harvard Caps Harris poll that finds Florida Governor Ron DeSantis closing the gap with former President Trump in a hypothetical 2024 matchup. I know that DeSantis is now at 28% in this poll, and President Trump, former President Trump, still holds a double-digit lead at 46%. Now, you are a fan of both of these men, but what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to be voting for President Trump in 2024, and that doesn't mean I'm not a fan of Ron DeSantis, but I don't think many serious political observers believe that the Republican nomination isn't going to go to President Trump with the strong base of support he has, the loyalty he has, and the divided field. I mean, we just saw this past week at the Republican Jewish Coalition, a handful of folks who all intend to run for president. I think in the poll you just saw, it was more of a heads-up matchup. But if you inject Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo and Mike Pence into that decision calculus. I think all of those people draw from Governor DeSantis. They don't draw from President Trump. And the way that Republican primaries stack up initially, it's winner take all. So if President Trump were to get half the vote and win a bunch of these early states, he would stack up a sufficient delegate lead where once you got to the states that have proportional allocations of delegates, you would have an insurmountable lead for President Trump. Kind of crazy just in the wake of the midterms to already be talking about presidential primaries, but I guess that's the world we live in now.
A wacky world it is. Real quick, one more question for you. I want to talk about the U.S. aid to Ukraine. You said you will not vote for one more dollar. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'm concerned that reports show a lack of compliance with our own laws when it comes to end-to-end authentication as to how a lot of that aid is being used. I'm increasingly worried that U.S. defense contractors just pay a bunch of people over there to request things that might not even get into the fight, that line the pockets of a bunch of Ukrainian oligarchs that don't really defend democracy or freedom. And some of that spending, not all, but some of it is inflationary. When we send billions upon billions of dollars to Ukraine and we don't care for the needs of our own people, it starts to really raise questions. And the most recent report suggests that the Biden administration is going to seek another $38 billion for Ukraine. I don't know that Ukraine has much of an incentive to end this war because we are now not only funding the fight, we are funding the operations of their government. So it's a bizarre circumstance where we don't even have a budget for our own government right now, but we are funding the budget of Ukraine's government. That seems to be a backward priority.
Well, it's something else if you think about some of the big issues here in the United States, too. What are we spending our money on here at home? A conversation that will continue. Congressman Gaetz, thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.